Okay, hello again. I left off here thinking aloud about how much evidence do I really need to prove this is a problem. What sometimes happens is you get to this point and you think this, and then you start proposing solutions, and then you think back to, oh, maybe there are things in my problem I need to prove in order for my solution pieces to make sense or even feel like they need to be a part of the solution. So that's something to think about too, is as you're thinking through solutions, you might realize that there's things in your problem section of the paper that you might need to prove first. So I would advise if you're stuck on either side of this, on the problem side or the solution side, um, start with one and see if it might inform the other. That tends to happen with essays like this. So when you get stuck, work on one or the other, and always remember the advice to just free write and let yourself come up with ideas, even if they seem silly. Nobody has to see it, remember. Okay, so I was here thinking, how much do I really need to do? I need to think through who's affected. Why should the state board care about this? I assume they do. This is their job. They're appointed to do this by the governor. The governor at least assumes they care about it. I might look up their particular backgrounds. That's not a huge group of people. And so even looking on the state board website and looking at the background of the chief academic officer, whom I happen to know is brand new, has a very different background than the person who came before him. He's more the businessy type. The guy before him was invested in education and families, so very different motivations. So looking at that sort of thing, I might know, for example, that business matters to some of them. So that public image and recruiting a workforce means having quality schools for the people they're hiring, for the men and women who are going to work at these places that Idaho is trying to attract in terms of business. We are a quote unquote family state in the sense that it's true that a high number of people with children or planning to have children care about schools, and they choose places to live, including at the state level, based on schools. And within the state, of course, they choose cities and school districts. So all of this matters in terms of public image, income, business, that sort of thing. And that might be the way to play to this group of people. And then I have to verify, support who is affected. So I might find examples of businesses that tout schools as a way to recruit, businesses who didn't establish here due to low education status or went elsewhere. And then, of course, long-term impacts. And some of these things are they fall under consequences too. And I start I'm thinking through these things and listing things here, but I'm also starting to wonder again, I might need to start moving on to my solution steps because some of these things might just be a given. I might just need to establish that we agree. But a couple of things came to mind. Things like long-term impacts of an undereducated population. We already have a high number of minimum wage jobs. People leaving Idaho. Long-term health impacts. Things like if more undereducated people are more likely to experience or perform is the wrong word. Abuse, I can just use the verb, and other long-term issues. And maybe the appeal to the desire that an education is a constitutional right in other contexts mean, sometimes we exceed the minimums of a right rather than barely meeting them. And then other contexts here. And I might look for states who invested in these teacher education programs or attracted more students or faculty and investment in K-20, which appeals to the state board's responsibility to K-20, which is actually unique to Idaho. Not many states, I think we may be the only state that has one state board of education for all of kindergarten through the PhD level. And so they are serving a large number of people here. And that is to my benefit as I'm making this argument. Okay, so one of my main solutions is to reform teacher preparation programs and professional development. And in short, I would propose that teacher education programs at the bachelor's level, I can specify that, should include at least 2 years of apprenticeship. And I guess that would include people who are going back to earn a master's in education who don't already have a teaching credential, should include at least 2 years of apprenticeship. And by apprenticeship, I mean working alongside another teacher, perhaps 1 year within the classroom and maybe 1 year underneath a mentor teacher in their own classroom, perhaps. But closely supervised, and then that master teacher would be heavily supported to be able to do that work of supervision. Currently, teachers spend maybe 3 or 4 months in a student teaching situation, and usually it's in the spring semester in a lot of programs. So they're entering a classroom after a teacher has already established the beginning of school. It's just not realistic, and it's not even close to enough time to understand what teaching really entails. So I will spare you my venting on that and pause here and hope that some of my thinking aloud through these gives you something to work with without, spending too much of your time listening to my rambling. But remember too that, just answering these questions. So for example, what specifically is my plan to solve the problem? I would really have to think through, okay, let's look at a current teacher education prep program, say at Boise State. I need to look at the curriculum. How many courses are they taking? What would I propose they would eliminate or add? Am I saying it needs to be a 5 or 6 year program, or am I saying that they need to cut classes as part of the 4 year program? I would have to get very specific in terms of what is my plan? How would this look? What would this look like? And then I would look, how does it fit, right? Why does this solution solve the problem I outlined above? How does my solution satisfy those affected by the problem, right? How does this proposal of apprenticeship as a major proponent of teacher prep programs satisfy those? And then workability. Will it work? Is it affordable? Can it actually happen? I would have a lot of people to convince, and it would be a huge change. But then again, I would hope that looking at this in terms of investing in the future would make sense. And what I'd really need to do too is look at what this might cost. I would need to look at not only the cost of additional tuition for students who may be doing another year of school. I would need to look at what I'm proposing in terms of the mentor teachers who are overseeing these apprentice teachers, what it would cost to pay them additional salary. All of that is a cost. And so I would have to somehow convince an already economically strapped state that this would be a viable solution and consider other forms of funding for it. So again, there's tons of things I would need to explain, improve, and look up for the solution step. So that's what I mean when I say those of you who are choosing narrow topics, like mine's pretty narrow. I'm saying that teacher education programs should include at least 2 years of apprenticeship. For that to be feasible in my essay, I've got a lot of things I need to talk through and prove, and a lot of sources I need to cite. So remember that in terms of those of you who are worried about filling space. As I'm finishing up these iSearches, and I'll say this in class too, but it's on my mind, I'm noticing a lot of lack of specifics. So for example, you might say something like, teacher education programs should be improved, and this would really improve education over time, but then there aren't any specifics. So even in this case where I have a specific way it should be improved, I still have a whole lot more to say in order for that to make sense and be visible or something I can visualize or see or follow along with. So remember that too, even in a inquiry-based paper, that giving those details to walk the reader through is really important. So, and then remember, it totally depends. Action may not be appropriate, and maybe in my case it's not, because I'm not asking for the state board to do something right this second unless there's something I'm asking them to vote a particular way on. It just wouldn't matter. But you do want some kind of conclusion, and ending memorably. A lot of times that means revisiting or an anecdote. One thing you don't want to do in a conclusion for an argument paper, really any paper, is to introduce brand new evidence or brand new ideas. You want to summarize and review without being super redundant. You want to restate, your main point, why this really matters, and that sort of thing. Risk being redundant if you're tempted to include new stuff. Including new stuff doesn't belong here. It tends to be confusing. So I will stop there, and I will see you this coming week. I hope this is helpful and not annoying to listen to my rambling. And I hope you guys have a great weekend.